Alrighty, welcome back to the Relai Bitcoin podcast. Today with Fred Krueger himself.
Yeah.
How are you, Fred?
I'm doing great, Julian. Thanks.
Awesome, perfect. Where are you calling from, and how are you today? And what is interesting for you in the Bitcoin world right now?
Well, I'm in LA right now, and yeah, I'm doing great. What's interesting right now, you know, I think everything this year is going to be about the ETF. The rollout of this ETF. Now we have
Hmm.
a Hong Kong ETF, but I'm really mainly focused on the US ETF right now.
Hmm.
Um, and uh, and I just think we're in this very secular big bull market for Bitcoin, and that's kind of my general thesis is that we're in the fourth bull market for
Hmm.
Bitcoin, and we're not at the very beginning of it either. We're sort of in the maybe a third of the way into it, maybe half, not a half, but a third to 20% of the way in. That's what I view.
Right,
So,
interesting. What
and
is your
I'm fully betting on it. So that's kind of
I think most of us are,
hmm
many of the
yeah,
listeners are. And I know Joel has introduced us, Joel from our team,
yeah.
because he's a big fan. He's reading a lot of your posts and your newsletter, etc. So
hmm
maybe please give us a bit of background. Where are you coming from? Like what was your original career, and what are you doing now? Basically, what are you focusing
Yeah.
on?
So listen, I'm just an investor. I have I started my career in finance, and so I was a trader on Wall Street for 6 years, and I was at the top firm of at the time, which was Solomon Brothers, in
Mm.
the top desk of the top firm, which is the arbitrage department. So I have a lot of experience trading, um, and uh, and then after trading, I spent 20 years in tech startups, and I have created and sold 10 companies
Oh wow.
uh, for a total of $500 million in exits.
Wow.
So I made a lot of money in tech, and I participated in crypto along the way, but I didn't get Bitcoin religion until 2019.
Hmm.
Um, and now I would consider myself a Bitcoiner. And I was not very active on Twitter at all until maybe 3 or 4 months ago, and I just didn't really have anything to add to the general discussion. And in December, I basically, when the ETFs they hadn't quite launched, but they were sort of prepping to launch. I made a few videos just sort of saying to people, listen, I think this is a much bigger deal than is kind of uh, generally recognized at the time. And I said, you really need, everybody's sort of getting this wrong. And I said, the Bitcoiners are getting this wrong because they're focused on Wall Street as the enemy. And they're sort of thinking self custody and, Wall Street bad, JP Morgan bad, uh, banks bad, the system bad. And Wall Street underestimated because they're just thinking, okay, this is just another ETF. So what? This is
Mm.
we have you know 1,000 of these things. This is just the newest flavor of the month. Let's get it over with and let's make some money. And they didn't. Neither side really understood the significance of this. And I just realized that my background was very unique, right? Because there's not that many people, you know, I would say I'm not trying to brag or anything, but like the number of people who were in my position on Wall Street, kind of, at the time I was there, or even since, it's a couple hundred people,
Mhm.
who are in that kind of managing that kind of money and stuff. And of those couple hundred people, how many of those are Bitcoiners? Well, 10. You know what I mean? So we're in a very small universe of people who could kind of really see both angles here.
Mhm.
And so I sort of felt, okay, I'm I'm going to just say something and see how it goes. And then I was sort of proven right with this ETF, and I was sort of thinking, okay, maybe that's it. I'll just stop videos and stuff. And then I decided, you know what? It's kind of interesting. I'm enjoying a little bit being in the limelight, and so I'll continue and I'll talk about other things. And I've sort of talked mainly about things like the power law and things that were interesting to me from my math background. I have a PhD in math from Stanford, and so a lot of things again, which may not fit the normal Bitcoin maxi narrative, but for me were just very obvious, and so I've kind of I've had a role in kind of bringing that to the forefront of the discussion, and I've basically brought out this guy Giovanni, who's an astrophysicist from Italy, and then another astrophysicist friend of mine, Stephen Perrinode, who's also a Bitcoiner. So I think one of the things we did and we're continuing to do is let's look at all this math and stats stuff really carefully, and let's try to see what kind of pattern, what we know from all this, right? And I feel like a lot of Bitcoiners they're sort of very sloppy with math. So, for example, they're sort of saying halvenings, it's a supply shock. Okay, well, let's quantify that. How much of a supply shock is this? How much of Bitcoin is left to be mined every year? As a percentage of total Bitcoin. Well, right now it went from 0.8% per year to 0.4%. Okay. So do we really believe that 0.4% supply differential per year is going to make that much of a difference in price? I don't, right? I just don't think that that's a significant enough thing. But a lot of people aren't really looking at the numbers in a very quantitative way. And so I feel like, one of the things I can add to the discussion is trying to quantify things a little bit better from a point of view of a guy who's been in has that background, right? And B, I've been involved in quantitative models on Wall Street and just in general for a very long time, so I can recognize things when things are very unique and when things aren't. And I can tell you, Bitcoin is very unique. It's not your average thing at all.
Right, and that's also why you're saying a couple of interesting things. You have all this very unique background and experience. Like, as you said, not many people went to top universities studying maths, plus then we're at top trading firms managing huge amounts of money, plus have understood Bitcoin, and so therefore basically can now really and also you've been into venture investing, and so not many people can really see what is happening from that perspective. So, but at the same time, you say Bitcoiners don't really get certain things, like for example, they overestimate a lot of things, like the halving. But at the same time, you're saying you're betting a lot on this bull market. So what makes you bet on it? How big do you think it will be, and how do you quantify that outcome?
So, hey everyone, this is Joel from Relai, and I'm here today to tell you about Relai Private. It's our exclusive service for private clients, small offices, small to mid-sized businesses, or just anyone looking to stack more sats with a higher volume. As a Relai Private client, you'll have access to a dedicated account manager, a team, and obviously a white glove service to help you with your Bitcoin needs. You also get personalized 24/7 access to our team, and you are in it for the special selection of reports and data we are sending to our Relai Private clients. If that sounds like something you or someone you know should like, send them to relay.app/private or click the link in the description below.
I would start with this power law, okay, which is, the concept that everybody kind of got wrong, which is something that got popular in about 2019, 2020, which was the stock to flow model, right? Now, if you really look at the stock to flow model, and I could go on for a long time but it's basically incorrect, okay? And there's a lot of problems with the math and the stock to flow model. However, there is a model which is actually pretty much bulletproof, which is this power law model. And the power law model says very simply, let's plot the price of Bitcoin in log terms, okay? And let's look at it also relative to the time since the Genesis block in the log terms. It's important to have both of those axes be in log terms. Now, if you do that, you notice that it's more or less oscillating around a straight line. And if you do a regression to that straight line, you find that the fit is the R squared is 97%. Okay. So that's the first clue that, okay, this is something really amazing. Because if you get a 97% R squared, this is not a coincidence. Now, the amazing thing is this happens over a period from when Bitcoin was at 10 cents to when Bitcoin was at $73,000, right? So you have 6 orders of magnitude of growth, right? From 10 cents to $73,000, almost $100,000, right? And yet the logarithms follow this linear slope with 97% correlation. Okay. Now, if you told me that any relationship like that in finance has a 97% correlation over 6 orders of magnitude, I would say you found the holy grail, right? Yeah. And yet this is true. It's a fact, right? So I think the first reason why I have conviction is I believe in this power law. I do think that this is sort of statistically how Bitcoin price is evolving. And furthermore, we can even talk about why this is happening. And the why of this is that Bitcoin adoption is also growing like a power law, right? It's growing like a power law. And so the important thing about a power law is the power, right? So at what power is this growing? And roughly it's growing at t to the power 6, okay? So as time goes by, it's not going at the square of time. It's not growing at the cube of time. It's growing to the 6th power of time, right? That's roughly how fast Bitcoin is growing. So you have this crazy, almost exponential growth, right? Not quite exponential, but it's almost exponential. And so a good way to think of it right now is Bitcoin's growing at about 40% per year. Mm-hmm. That's sort of the trend line Bitcoin. Now, around this, there's tremendous volatility, right? And if you look at it in sort of normal space, it almost makes no sense. It's sort of like, okay, it went up a lot in 2017, it crashed. It went up a lot in 2020, it crashed. Okay, now it's back. Okay, what do you make of this? It just seems like a, complete just sort of random event, right? Mm-hmm. But if you look at it in log terms, you see, no, there's a very clear pattern, right? A very clear pattern. And furthermore, you can even estimate the volatility around this pattern, right? So basically, the volatility is around 0.3 in logarithmic terms. What that means is that you can go up by 10 to the power of 0.3, which is a double, or you can go down by 10 to the power negative 0.3, which brings you down to about half. So sort of in any year, you have a equal chance of doubling versus halving if you're at trend line, right? Which is kind of where we are right now. So I would sort of say right now we are at fair value of Bitcoin, roughly. And I would say, we have an even chance of going to say 125,000 Bitcoin in a year versus going back down to 30,000. Now that would be without the trend line growth. So the trend line growth puts you at around 100,000 by the end of this year. So I would say if I had to put a confidence interval, I would say 50,000 to 200,000, with 100,000 being the mean. kind of for the end of the year. Now, that's kind of that really should give you a lot of confidence that we're in a pretty good spot to invest in Bitcoin. But on top of that, we now have this ETF, right? And the ETF is probably a reason why we're going to exceed this on the upside, right? So, we're in this ETF and we're in the fourth bull market of Bitcoin. Okay, so everybody's focused on these halvings. I don't think that's the correct way to look at things. I think the correct way is looking at it in terms of bull markets. And the bull markets we had, roughly speaking, we had the first bull market was from the beginning to Mt. Gox collapse, right? November of 2013. That was the first bull market. I had money in Mt. Gox. I remember it well. Okay. Okay. That was the first bull market. The second bull market was really from late 2015 all the way out till December of 2017, right? That was the second big bull market. That was really fueled by Ethereum, right? That was the catalyst of that market. It wasn't even a Bitcoin bull market. It was really an Ethereum-driven bull market. And the third bull market was from January of 2019 or late, maybe December 2018 till end of 2021, right? That's the way I would time that bull market. Mm-hmm. And if I had to say what it was caused by, I would say it was caused by search for yield. It was yield and DeFi, and people looking for yield with Celsius and FTX and Luna and all the rest, right? Again, not really Bitcoin, right? So people were, yes, you had Michael Saylor pushing Bitcoin back then, but really the narrative, everything was all about stable coins and to some extent about even Solana and other kind of things. So now we have this fourth bull market. And the fourth bull market, I would say it's really driven by ETFs more than anything else, right? And I think the promise of the ETF started kicking in when we were at Bitcoin 25,000 almost, And so I think we're in that bull market. The market has quadrupled since the low of the last market, right? We've quadrupled off of 15,000. And so, where can we go from the low to the new high? Well, I'd say we could probably go 20x, that's normally where you go. Like if you go back from in the last bull market, right? We bottomed out at Bitcoin 3,500, right? So we started 2019 at around 4,000, okay? And we ended up at, 69,000, right? Mm-hmm. So, from 3,000 to 69,000, let's just call it 20x, right? Mm-hmm. So, it seems like a lot, but actually that's what we did. And we did even more in the 2017 market. So
I remember 2017 was like from 1K roughly 1.2K to 20. So,
right, but really it started earlier, right? So I think it really started more in like 2015 timeframe, right? So it was more like, if you remember, Bitcoin was around 500 then, right? Mm-hmm. So it really went from 500 to almost 20K, right? Mm. So let's just call it 30x. So I think a good way to think of these things, these bull markets, is historically they've lasted 3 or 4 years. Okay, the first one was, let's call it 3 years, from 2010 till end of 2013. 4 years, really, almost, right? Mm. It was just an enormous bull market, right? It was the biggest of all. But I think, going up 20x from the low in this market is conceivable, right? Mm-hmm. It's probably a reasonable thing. And we're up already 4x. So let's just say 5x left to go in this phase. That might be more. There's no solid rules. But, I think that, for us to go, 250, 300K in this kind of bull market is entirely possible. You know, and it may be bigger, right? It may just continue all the way up to 1 million. Who knows, right?
Mm-hmm.
I do think we're in this bull market. The big picture is we're in a bull market. You know,
Mm-hmm.
we're in a bull market. We have this catalyst, which is this ETF, which is so much bigger than the Ethereum catalyst of 2017, so much bigger than this DeFi catalyst of 2020. This is the real deal, right? This is like traditional finance finally gets an opportunity to buy into Bitcoin.
Well, I agree. I think so too. But then that's why I wonder why we have just kind of crossed the all-time high a little bit, like 2-3K above the last all-time high, and now we went back down to almost 60K, even though the US ETFs were the most successful ETFs ever in terms of the start of the first 3 months. They accumulated, I think, more than 30 billion in asset under management, which is huge for like 3 months. Not even it's a huge start. And also now it's starting to roll out in Asia, Hong Kong, etc. But at the same time, you see like price dropping. Like what's happening? And
well, I think it's, if you look at this power law, it, you know, when I first pushed this thing, I was telling people about this. Everybody's like, Fred, you're way too bearish. And I'm like, I'm not bearish. I'm like saying 40% a year. That's not bearish, right? And I was like, look, $1 million Bitcoin is, you know, the power law says $1 million Bitcoin, it'll take 10 years to get there, right? Now, and which I believe, right? Now, everybody's like, Fred, we're going to get there in 2 years. And I'm like, no, there's no evidence according to this statistical pattern that we're going to get there in 2 years. Now, could we? I mean, yeah, but it would break all the models, right? So I think there's a certain speed at which these things happen, and it's not as much, it's not quite as fast as, you know, a lot of Bitcoiners would want to believe, right? And, you know, so I'm not saying it's you know, I don't think anything's broken. In other words, like the models are not broken, nothing's broken. This is absolutely normal behavior. Mm-hmm. And, you know, if we ended up this year at 100,000 or 120,000, that's a great year. It's fantastic, you know, and doesn't mean that there's something wrong with the ETFs or anything, you know. We're just right on track. You know what I mean? That's kind of my view.
If you zoom out, absolutely, I agree. But then I'm just wondering, like, why is the price moving into the other direction while we have all these positive signals? Like we have the ETF, it's rolling out all over the world. More and more institutional money is coming. Liquidity is at all-time lows. People don't want to sell their Bitcoin. More than 70% of all the Bitcoin are held in with hodlers that hold them for more than a year, etc., etc. So there's so many, and then there's the halving, which you say it's negligible, but still there is some effect. There is less organic selling pressure, but at the same time, the price loses like 10K over these 2 months where all of this happened. I'm like, what? Why?
Well, that's. You know, I remember Andreas Antonopoulos had a video, and he was sort of like, well, Bitcoin is down 10%. And he goes, most people would view that as a market crash. He goes, for us Bitcoiners, it's a Wednesday. And, you know, like, I just don't think it matters. I think it's noise. It's complete noise. It doesn't matter whatsoever. You read nothing into it. It doesn't matter. It's zero. This is normal. This is how you get to 150,000. You go there by dropping, and then you consolidate and you do nothing for 2 months, and then all of a sudden it goes up. I mean, that's the way Bitcoin works, right? It absolutely does not steadily go up exactly like you expect it to, and that is absolutely, which is why you cannot trade Bitcoin, right? It's almost impossible to trade because the signal, if anything, is always the reverse, right? So if I had to guess right now, like, what do I think Bitcoin will probably be doing tomorrow? I think it probably will go down. Okay, most probably. Why? Because usually what it does is it kind of meanders down, and then all of a sudden, for reasons that nobody predicts or understands, it goes way up. Okay. That's Bitcoin. Okay. And so if you're following the trend points down, you're saying, okay, got to sell. And then you get out, then all of a sudden it goes way up. And, so I would say, where are we likely to go? Probably down, sideways to down, until we go way up. And the only way you're going to catch that way up move is by being in Bitcoin.
So accumulate
you cannot time it. There's it's an absolute fool's errand to time it. It's just a complete. Anybody who tells you that they think they can time this is completely incorrect.
Yeah.
And so you have to realize that I think you have to have conviction that this thing is going a lot higher over a fair amount of time. And with that conviction, you just have to, it's a game of how much Bitcoin you can accumulate. That's it. And you just got to think in terms of, I've got X amount of Bitcoin, and I am not going to be worried about whether it goes up or down, because what am I going to do? You could sell it at 61,000. So what? Okay. Then when are you going to buy it? You're going to buy it back at 50,000. Is that your strategy? That's a bad strategy, right? Because it may never get to 50,000. So right. you basically, because of some chart pattern, you're giving up on the best performing asset of all times. Makes no sense. You've just failed at the game of life, right? You just screwed up big time, right? So, you can't look at these things and sort of say, I'm going to buy lower. That's a bad idea. Now, if the volatility is just too much for you, well, don't participate. Doesn't matter to me. It's sort of like, this is a game of the people who hold on the most will win everything. And the other ones, they won't. They'll lose. It's fine. And that's what separates the new winners of the new economy from those who won't participate. And I think 98% of the people will not participate in this Bitcoin move. 98. I mean, at most, maybe 2% of the old investor crew are going to participate in this, I think. Because less than 1% of investors own Bitcoin right now. I mean, I guarantee you, you look at the average sort of Swiss investor group, first of all, probably 1 in 100 or has any sizable, maybe some of them own a tiny little bit of Bitcoin. Their son owns some Bitcoin or something like that. But they don't own 1%, 5% of their net worth in Bitcoin. The average, they don't. The average Swiss, investor does not. And so if they don't now, what's going to make them make that decision in the next 2 years? Probably nothing. And they're going to just watch it, and it'll have gone up, and they're going to say, well, I can't possibly buy it now because it's 250,000.
Yeah.
I can't acknowledge the fact that I made a mistake and didn't buy it back in 2024. So they're not going to participate. So I think it's going to be a very small amount of people will end up participating in this. And this is a changing of the guard. And then, those people who do will be the new owners.
Yeah, that's the problem, because the problem is that people don't understand. Like most of 90, as you said, I think so too. Like 90% of the people don't understand what this is. Some even do invest with very small amounts, but they are not in it for the long run. They're in it for the speculation. So therefore, always whenever the Bitcoin price is high, they think, no, it's too, like, now it's gone. It's the train has continued without me. I'm not on the train. It's fine. It's too late now, right? But whenever it goes down, they're like, oh, now it's over. Like, it's all over. And probably they're gonna sell the rest of what they have, because they think now it's like, this shit is done. I'm gonna move on. So the reality is that the longer the time goes, the more of these normal people are selling their Bitcoin or not participating, and those who have understood, they are accumulating more and more because they buy more when the price is
I
low and
just
they
don't
never
think. I
sell.
think it's a general the idea. Look, you have the white paper on your back. I think it's sort of like people. The idea of Bitcoin is so revolutionary that if you really understand what it means, it really means that we've found a better version of money, right? So
Yeah.
it will change. It's going to change all of human economic activity because we're moving, and people think they call it whatever. It's a property, it's a trade, whatever, but it's money, right? This is going to be, I call it money for the 21st century, right?
Mm-hmm.
And either you get it or you don't. But at the end of the day, it's very clear to me that this paper money system that we've been experimenting with now for 100 years, let's call it, more or less, it's on its last legs. It's not going to survive forever. And if I had to guess, I would say 30 years from now we will be on a Bitcoin standard. And I'm going to be a very old man. You're going to be a middle-aged man with some grandchildren by then. But we are headed into a new world, right? And I think it's one of these things. It's like artificial intelligence. If you told me even 10 years ago that we are going to have artificial intelligence apps that can make a music for anything you want, I would say that's not possible. How can that be possible? Or write poetry or do marketing, or write code. I would say not in the next 20 years. Yeah. Of course, now there it is, right? And I think if Bitcoin is one of these things where if you say all the financial world, banks, fiat, central banks, all the rest are all going to change, and we're going to move to a finite currency, right? Which is completely peer-to-peer and has finality within, say, an hour, anywhere in the world. Mm-hmm. Well, I would say most people say, yeah, no, that's not happening. It's all going to, that we're going to have KYC and this and that. You don't. There is no KYC in Bitcoin, right? It's like I'm sending it to you, you get it, done. And so it's such an amazing. The concept of it is such a game changer, right? If we really move to that world, it's such a game changer and has so many more impacts. It's not just a payment mechanism. It's not like, well, this is a better payment mechanism. It's not that at all, right? This is a way for economic value to be determined. This is a way for, individuals to hold their own money independent of the state, and, if you don't like your government, you can move with your Bitcoin. Yeah. So it's such a freedom concept that, and I would say the number of people who really get it right now is pretty low. Mm-hmm. It's pretty low. I mean, there's even of all the people who own Bitcoin, there's only 10 million hardware wallets on the planet. 10 million. That's between Trezor and Ledger. For example, that's their total amount, right? So
it's not a lot.
It is not a lot, right? We're talking about 1/10%.
Yeah, now 0.1% of the world's population own a hardware wallet. Then. Yeah,
that's crazy. And there's a million people who want to run Bitcoin. A million whole coiners. You know what I mean? So the numbers are still really, really small. The real, this is not a discovered trade. People don't, and I don't think even 10 years from now, it won't be completely, people will still be warming up to exactly what it is. The price will be higher, but I think people won't still quite see it. I feel very fortunate that I kind of get it, right? I kind of see the future and I understand it. And I'm sure you do too, but I think it's not obvious to get it. So I think it's some circumstance, some odd thing that happened that we are lucky enough to kind of see this before it's kind of well understood. But once you really get it, then you don't really care. Like, okay, it went from 70,000 to 60. I don't.
And that's the thing.
What do I care? I mean, I don't care.
So as you did get it, how are you investing? Like, what's your strategy? How you said you're not trading, you're investing. No. How you do it, and without giving financial advice to people, how do you suggest people how they could invest? And also, I have a follow-up question on that. But first, how are you going about this?
Well, look, I think it's a little easier if you're a young person to make a commitment than if you're older. And the reason why I say that is if you're in your 20s and you get Bitcoin religion, right? And all of a sudden Bitcoin doesn't work out the way you think, you can always do something different in your 30s or 40s, right? You have a little bit more flexibility, right? If you're in your 40s, 50s, or 60s and you've accumulated a bunch of wealth, now for you to make the leap to say, okay, I'm going to take a substantial amount of that wealth and bet on this algorithm, right? This digital algorithm. If you're wrong, okay, great. You might have lost half to 2/3 of your wealth. Okay. And there's no going back because you're not going to recreate that, that wealth that you had. So I definitely think it's harder for all. I don't think the net result is, I think the net result is you should probably be quite a bit long Bitcoin. And then the question is, where do you put the other money that you're not long? And I would say be very conservative with that, right? So I recommend people have sort of a barbell type strategy. And, Bitcoin is all the alpha you need, right? That's it. You don't need to like buy oil stocks or, FANG or whatever. Really. I do own some of them. But Bitcoin is the majority of your portfolio. And, I would recommend everybody have some cash because shit happens, right? And, what you don't want to do is you don't want to have to sell your Bitcoin because you got hit by a car or you got sued or something, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And you don't want to sell your Bitcoin at the worst possible time, right? So I think that the one mistake I see young people do is they put too much of their money in Bitcoin, right? They don't have any cash reserve, right? They're just too enthused about the asset. They don't have any cash reserve. They don't have 2 months of cash, 3 months of cash, right? And then they lose their job or something happens, right? And if, you've got to have some line of defense, right? Yeah. And the way I look at it is it's sort of like in warfare, you need offense and you need defense, or in in football, right? You need defensive players and offensive players, right? Your strikers and you need your goalie too, right? Yeah. And so I think you need a little bit of both. You need both offense and defense. So I would suggest building a portfolio that is somewhat defensive, and your defense you can use just cash, bonds, whatever, right? But it should be stuff that you can sell quickly if you need to, right? And then your offense, I think, is mainly Bitcoin. So that's the way I look at things.
But do you cost average into Bitcoin?
Sorry, look. I don't, but I would say for dollar cost averaging is a great strategy for young people and for For people who are like in the middle of their careers, it's great, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're earning money, just put it in. Put the money that you don't need in the defensive strategy, put it all in Bitcoin. I think that's a great idea, right?
On the regular basis. Yeah.
Yeah, and for me, I've had a bunch of these sort of private investments.
Mm-hmm.
They're a little bit like Easter eggs. They come due like, oh, so and so just sold their company, or so and so. So something like that happens. I'm like, great, I can buy some more Bitcoin. You know what I mean?
Nice.
And that's the way I look at it. It's more just like, okay, Bitcoin's the savings account, and everything else is kind of the checking account and the disaster relief account, etc.
I love this analogy. I love it. That's exactly how I see it. It's a savings account on steroids, right?
But you really got to treat it like the savings. You don't go into you're not supposed to go into your savings account, right?
Right. Yeah.
You don't go into your savings account. You don't worry too much about your savings account. You're not looking at a chart saying, okay, this is my savings account.
Yeah.
You kind of forget about your savings account, right? That's
Absolutely.
your best strategy, right? So that's what I would recommend people do. The only thing I would say that is, look, I didn't sell any Bitcoin during the last bull market, right? So I wrote it all the way down. Was I unhappy? Not really. I got to tell you, I didn't really freak me out. Okay. And I bought more in early 2013. Okay. And, and you can be a little opportunistic. Like in early 2013, I bought into GBTC because the discount was really great. Right. And I bought MSTR also because I wanted to get a little bit more leverage. Okay. So that worked out really well. Right. So, but look, my view is that I got my core Bitcoin, which I really do not want to sell under any circumstance. Would I potentially sell it if we get using this power law and we get to one of these kind of overvalued type scenarios? I might sell a little bit, and just a little bit, just purely with the idea of buying it back later, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I would do that trade very, very on a very much it wouldn't be a very active trading. It would just be like, okay, we've gone at the absolute upper band of where I think the valuation should be. Great. Time to take a little bit off the table, maybe 30% off the table, and just put it in a bucket that we're looking to buy it back at much lower prices.
Right.
But even then, it's you have tax consequences of doing that.
That's true.
So it's not it's just it's something that you really should avoid doing. You should avoid every kind of activity other than just putting more into Bitcoin. I think
that's exactly what we think as well at
I think it's just you just want to accumulate more. Right. It's like just you want to get your pot of Bitcoin as big as possible.
It's the best asset ever invented. So why would you own less of it? You want to own more of it always. You never sell. You always want more of the best asset.
I mean, look, I've kind of resigned myself to. I do think that I kind of have probably close to my peak Bitcoin right now. I don't expect to get that much more Bitcoin, but it's fine. I got Bitcoin goes to 1 million. No problem. Like it doesn't matter. Like the amount of Bitcoin I have is immaterial, right?
It's fine.
I can do whatever I want. It doesn't matter, right? No. And if I sell some of it, fine, And I think, but I do think it's Bitcoin's probably going to continue going even beyond 1 million. So it's just I think it's like one of the greatest opportunities that I've seen in my life. That and I think especially for a young person right now, it's like I would say everybody's always saying, well, Fred, you boomers, you had it so good because you could buy these houses and they went up so much. And I'm like, okay, we didn't have Bitcoin. Okay. You guys have Bitcoin.
You guys
So
have real estate. We have Bitcoin.
you have Bitcoin. Now, Bitcoin is like 10 times as good as real estate, right? So you guys are the people who have it easy, not us. Okay. Not
That's great
us.
to hear,
Okay.
actually. That's nice to hear.
So I think, so just stop whining and just buy some Bitcoin. Okay. That's kind of my view. Like, I really have no tolerance for people who are like, they're complaining. And then I'm like, well, have you bought any Bitcoin? No. Why not?
Yeah.
Like, if I were you, I would be like 100%. Like, what's wrong with you? Have you really studied it? No, I haven't studied it. Okay. Why not? It's the best performing asset of all times.
Yeah.
You might want to consider studying it a little bit, Otherwise, you're just complaining, and you're complaining against the government. You're complaining this, but you have no right to complain. I mean, you've been given all the opportunity. You still have an opportunity ahead of you. It's not like this is over.
Right.
And
no, totally. I think that's very well said. It's a very good and conversation ender, like from someone who is as experienced as you, basically giving advice to the young people, the millennials who kind of think that they're, fucked. No, you're not fucked. Like, this is what you need to do: study Bitcoin and invest accordingly.
And really study it and really get convinced. It's not like a guy like Fred's going to convince you. You have to convince yourself, right? You really have to convince yourself of why Bitcoin is so great. Yeah. And I would say read everything that's written on Bitcoin. I'm writing a book, so you can read my book. I'm writing a book with a friend of mine. It's going to be more of almost like a coffee table book, and so but it has all kinds of little factoids which a lot of people don't know about Bitcoin. Just having been so deep into the weeds in Bitcoin. But look, read about it, get religion, do all the things that Bitcoiners tell you to do, right? Like self-custody, do some Bitcoin transactions, get a Lightning wallet, do all that stuff. If you can, run your own node, like do everything, buy a little bit of an ETF, do everything, right? Mm-hmm. And become a Bitcoiner, and that's it. That's I would say probably my best advice to people right now is like, you need to become a Bitcoiner a little bit right now. It's a great time to do it. These ETFs are just starting. I mean, they just came out in January 11th. We're April 20th. Now this is like you're in the marathon, and you're in the first kilometer of the marathon, and you're like, well, my shoelace is untied. Maybe like it's a marathon. You're running a very long race. Get prepared for a very long race. This is not over in April of 2024. This is not going to be over in April of 2034. This is going to be a very, very long race. And, get used to running a very long race, and, and get the conviction and the strength needed to run a very long race, and you'll do great. You'll do great. And so, I'm not super familiar with Relai, but because I've used the American version of it, the Swan Bitcoin.
Right.
So
yeah,
I'm friends with those guys. And, but look, these are good platforms, right? All these things, they're good ways to save and to develop the discipline that you need to become a good Bitcoiner and to build a stash. And so I would say you should, focusing your life somewhat around that will lead to very good results, in my opinion.
Hey, this is Joel again from the Relai team. First of all, thanks for listening or watching to the podcast. We really appreciate your help here. If you want to actually help us out further, you can leave us a 5-star review in the Apple Podcasting Store, in Spotify, on YouTube, or wherever you listen to podcasts, because this way we'll actually reach more people with this fantastic content. And I'll see you in the next one.
There you go. Stop whining, stop complaining, just get into Bitcoin. And
get into Bitcoin. And stop whining about the price going down. The price is not down. The price is up, okay? Last I checked, the Bitcoin price over a last year, it's up 100%. Like, stop whining. Okay, stop whining. So done.
There you go. Become a Bitcoiner.
Become a Bitcoiner. That's it.
All right, man. Thank you so much. This is
okay, Julian. It was a pleasure. I really enjoyed it. Thanks.
Me too, man. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Cheers, Fred.